So you probably clicked my video seeing that thumbnail going, wow, this week's probably going to be pretty good. Well, it is going to be pretty good. There's going to be some bumps in the road as usual. However, let's just get started. Thank you guys so much for being here. Welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope, this time for January 25th through January 31st of 2021. We are almost out of the first month of the year. We have some pretty awesome transits going on this week. And yes, of course, Mercury stations retrograde this week, and we're going to cover that as it comes along, which is going to be on Saturday. But I really don't think this Mercury retrograde is going to be bad. However, I think, of course, just like every other Mercury retrograde, it's going to bring its ups and downs. It's going to bring its issues and its problems. But I do think on a personal level, once this Mercury retrograde's over, things will get really leveled out. Things will be really nice. So let's go ahead and jump straight into it. Here we are on, what's this? January 25th. There we go. So starting on Monday, we're going to have the moon ingress into Cancer, a little bit more in the later morning, early afternoon. And as the moon goes into Cancer, of course, I think I was kind of thinking about this moon and Gemini transit that we had like on Saturday, Sunday. Lot of stimulation, a lot of ideas flowing, right? Like that's what we're kind of coming off of. Now that the moon's going to be going into Cancer after it leaves Gemini, this is where, we start going, okay, what actually needs to be taken care of? What actually needs to be of necessity? The moon really isn't going to do much. The moon it will eventually sextile Mars and eventually go opposite Venus. But on Monday, as the moon just ingresses into Cancer, I think this is much more of a, kind of a quick break to go, okay, focus on your needs. Take care of what you need to take care of. With all this Aquarius stuff going on, it can be kind of like distracting and you could be wanting to do a bunch of new things. But like this moon in Cancer day is just more of a day to kind of take care of what needs to get taken care of. Especially because also, if you notice, the sun is going to be squaring Uranus on Monday as well. So the sun squaring Uranus, I think this is where we're going to start to see the instability. Like I said before in the past few weeks, as we have all of this Aquarius stuff going forward, it's going to take time for it to show up. Like I'm still completely traumatized and haunted by the Saturn-Pluto conjunction being like, we got like one little news article that was like, new virus found in China, whatever. And then, here we are a year later. It takes time for certain things to manifest. The one thing too, with all of the crazy Saturn Uranus stuff that we're going to have, and like that Mars Uranus conjunction conjoining with the moon on inauguration day. Thank God nothing crazy happened. However, things do take time to kind of unravel, right? Like you never know what happened that day that is eventually going to turn into something. Just like how when we saw, in December on that eclipse with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, it was like, new virus discovered. That's just a small thing, you know what I mean? Sure, it happened on that big day, but then it's like that could eventually grow into something. So I guess to say is like we're not necessarily out of the woods yet. This is also why I'm bringing up the sun square Uranus. Like this might be one of the days where we start to really see that instability. Uranus and Taurus, like there's definitely not like things are very stable at the moment, which is very cracking me up. But I also thought it was kind of interesting seeing the news about people protesting in Russia. Thought that was kind of interesting. But anyway, the sun squaring Uranus on Monday. This is where you can look for the instability. This is where you can kind of try to adapt, try to innovate yourself with all this Aquarius stuff. It's going to require doing a new thing. And also the one thing is with Uranus and Taurus, and especially with Mars and Taurus too, we have to get out of our comfort zones. That's the big thing that I've also kind of noticed for myself too. It's been like, whoa, like this is actually new. And you kind of have to admit, like, this is a little uncomfortable. This is a little bit like it's new. You've never done it before. It's unfamiliar. And so you can't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone. However, I think with Monday, as the sun squares Uranus, you might kind of see where that has to occur. You're going to, kind of witness how that's going to play out. But we move into Tuesday, and really the only thing that we've going on Tuesday is the moon's going to make a sextile to Mars really early in the morning. It will eventually get to a trine with Neptune, but whatever. So Tuesday doesn't look bad. Tuesday doesn't actually look all that crazy. But I also want to remind you guys, all of this stuff that's in Aquarius, like, it's going to feel like, what's the best way to look at it? It's kind of like when you look back at, let's say summer, like let's say September of 2020. Let's look back at September of 2020. In the moment, you know, you don't realize what you're going through in the moment, but then we can look back and we're like, holy shit, that Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, and Capricorn squaring Mars that was beginning to retrograde, or as it was retrograding in September, like, we're in a completely different space now, right? And I think we're far enough away from it to be able to like appreciate how different things were. And why I'm bringing this up is with all this stuff in Aquarius, like, you know, sure, on Tuesday, it's just the moon, you know, sextiling Mars. Nothing crazy. But again, all of this is still kind of going on in the background. So while this may not be like a very significant day, all of this stuff is still, you know, going on. That's not just going to be like, oh, Tuesday is just like another Tuesday or whatever. But with Tuesday, I think with the moon in Cancer, making that sextile to Mars and then kind of doing its own thing for a minute until it makes that opposition with Venus, it's really just kind of like, hey, you know, what do I need to take care of? Mars in Taurus, again, I can't reiterate enough. Go at your own pace. Do things when you got to do them. You know, this is not about going uphill and doing big sprints, right? Like, this is kind of like a marathon. It's okay to go at your own pace. I think the best thing that you got to do though is just make sure you're going. Just make sure you're doing something. Like, that's the problem with Mars and Taurus. It can like really lose that momentum sometimes, especially as it's square and all of this kind of stuff. So just make sure you keep that momentum up. As the moon's in Cancer sextiling Mars, do something you got to do. Do something to take care of yourself. Do something that's going to nourish yourself and that's going to motivate yourself to move forward. So again, Tuesday, not that much, but Tuesday could be like a good refuel day. Like, I think of, it's like a pit stop, essentially. Like, just take care of what you got to take care of. Get the juice that you need, because as we move forward, this is when this week gets really cool. So, January 27th, we have the moon at those end degrees of Cancer, making the opposition to Venus in Capricorn, which, the one thing I want to say about Venus in Capricorn is, it's not going to be here, but Venus next year, or I should say at the end of this year, Venus is going to station retrograde at 26 degrees Capricorn on top of Pluto. And so Venus has one more cycle around the zodiac, basically. So just kind of like, it's not really going to be super important for the next Venus retrograde, but it's just something to bring up. And also, like, I want to like subtly break in the news of this Venus retrograde now, because like I don't want to be like in December and be like, oh, by the way, we have this like really terrible retrograde at the end of the like coming up, like, you know, don't be scared. We have like a very intense Venus retrograde at the end of the year, which is going to be very transformative, I think is actually a very appropriate word for it. But anyway, moving on. Moon's gonna be opposite Venus. Again, the moon's in Cancer, saying, hey, this is what my needs are. And Venus in Capricorn's be like, you know, what can we do to address those needs? What kind of system can we set up to take care of that? I think as Venus is conjoining Pluto here, or getting ready to conjoin Pluto, this is where there's kind of like this anticipation of like, this is very much like, it reminds me of like if you go up to like someone, if you work for a big company, you go to someone in HR and be like, you know, I've had this problem, but I don't know what to say, and it's actually like a really big issue that needs to take care of. It's like, they're going to take care of it as fast as they can. I think on Wednesday, this is kind of looking at like, hey, what are the necessities? Where do you need to be nourished? Where do you need to be taken care of? And what system do you have in place to get that? Again, Venus is in Capricorn, you know, play by the rules, play by the system. And I, you know, don't mean to be like, oh, just do everything, I guess, by the rule book. But I just, with Venus in Capricorn, Venus like wants to have a plan. At least Venus wants to have some type of structure. It doesn't mean necessarily have to go by the rule book, but like have a fucking plan or something. So Wednesday actually looks so much more so like, okay, you know, let's address these needs. Let's actually take care of it. You know, let's not just ignore it. Not that you've been ignoring it, but this looks good. This doesn't look bad. This is the moon in domicile opposite Venus. Like, okay, I'll take that. And of course, the moon later on Wednesday evening is going to enter Leo. And that brings us to Thursday, which I haven't been able to use this noise in a long time. But we actually have a pretty awesome day. Look at this. So haters will say that this Mars square ruins it. But I will say that Jupiter being Cazimi is in the superior position from Mars. This is really good. Like, I talked about this in my monthly horoscope, which I totally forgot. I haven't even done my monthly horoscope for February, so I may not even get to it because I also am like going to be in the middle of a move and a bunch of other crazy shit. Anyway, I just want to acknowledge I totally forgot to fucking do that. But I talked about this in my January horoscope. The sun conjoining Jupiter. Like, we haven't really had a good Jupiter day in a while. Like, not since, I think, Venus conjoined Jupiter and Sagittarius before they moved into Capricorn, which that was like that was like November of 2019. So like Jupiter and Capricorn, right? Like, doesn't have that much dignity. There hasn't really any dignity there. Then Jupiter was conjoining Pluto the whole time and being squared by Mars the whole time. And then of course, like in the same presence as Saturn while in Saturn's house. Not to mention Jupiter had the South Node go over. I totally forgot about that. I was just going back over the other day about, do you guys remember Saturn conjoining the South Node? This was like September, October of 2019. That was so like, I feel like that was like the worst part of like the Saturn and Capricorn part, but I was just thinking about like, holy shit, Saturn on the South Node. We also had Jupiter on the South Node earlier in 2019. That would have been late 2019, early 2020. But again, Jupiter's kind of had the shit beat out of it. Jupiter did conjoin Saturn in Aquarius, where I guess you can look at that as good, but that's not necessarily like, you know, like a good Jupiter day. Like Jupiter conjoining Saturn would be like, you know, finishing the race. Jupiter conjoining the sun opposite, like with this full moon in Leo, is like the celebrating the win right afterwards. So let's break this down a few ways, because this is really, in my opinion, this and the Mercury Retrograde is what we really need to get into. So again, haven't had a good Jupiter day in a while. So for one, for those that have Jupiter as your Time Lord, I just think this is gonna feel really good, really new, really refreshing. Jupiter's in Aquarius. Jupiter is all about, you know, our faith. Jupiter is about how we see our world. Jupiter is about what we believe in. With Jupiter and Aquarius, we're learning that we have to do things differently, right? We're learning that we have to have a system that is structured, but is also open, and that is more focused on sustainability and not so much focused on, you know, initiation. And so with Jupiter and Aquarius, there's kind of all of these ideas flowing. There's all this room for opportunity, right? There's all this room for connection, but it just has to make the magic happen, right? As the sun conjoins Jupiter, as the sun, you know, goes Cazimi, just like, you know, what's actually going to be a good example is, let's reflect back to Saturday when the sun conjoined Saturn. And like, I told you guys, like, even I felt it too. Like, I was blown away on Saturday because I just felt like it all clicked, like it all hit. Like that sun conjoining Saturn and Aquarius, it was like, this is what needs to be done. This is what... Speaking of Saturn, Saturn's hour. Did you guys fucking hear that? That was crazy. Anyway, that was fun. That was cool. Anyway, on Saturday, when the sun conjoined Saturn, it was like, this is what needs to be done. This is what the next couple years are going to look like, you know. This is what you got to commit to. This is what you're obligated for. It's the same thing with the sun conjoining Jupiter, except when it was Saturn is so much more of like, this is the responsibility. This is even for some people, this is the problem. This is the boundary. This is the parameters you have to work within. With Jupiter, this is the opportunity. With Jupiter, this is what's next. With Jupiter, this is what we can grow into. With Jupiter, this is what the vision is. So as the sun's conjoining Jupiter, this is like, now that all of this shit is clicked, now we can really start going, okay, like, what's next? What can we plan for? What's really going to be out there? This looks very, very inspiring, very, very hopeful. It is squaring well, not to mention, hold on, we're not even talking about the full moon yet. With the full moon in Leo. The moon is full. You got the sun on top of Jupiter, right? Like, I bring this up a lot with the full moons. This is full illumination. The sun, right? It brings light. This is what gives us the ability to see. But the moon lights up the dark. The moon lights up the night. The moon lights up what we're not used to seeing all the time. And it goes through phases, right? And so as we get through this full moon, and we're being able to see, like, you know, we could see what's going on in the day. We could see what's going on in the night. Sun's in Aquarius, where the sun is, yes, it's in its sign of detriment. So I also think the sun-Jupiter conjunction is also really good for the sun. I think it could use that. But as the sun's in Aquarius, right, like, this isn't so much about us being like, oh, we're feeling great and everything's amazing and I'm ready to go. The sun in Aquarius is like when you're on low power mode. Like, I keep my phone on low power mode, like, all the time. Because it's like, it's about sustainability, right? Like you can't always be very solar, which is like, very having a lot of charisma, having a lot of personality, being very like in tune with yourself. Like that's not always possible. And with the sun in Aquarius, it's so much more about like what is what's the system, or what's kind of like, in some cases what's kind of everyone else doing, where does the grain go, so I can allow that to support me. And so again, with the sun in Aquarius, we're kind of like in low power mode here. We're not supposed to be doing a lot or feeling a lot. But what is going to kind of, light a spark underneath our ass is this moon in Leo. Because now the moon's in the sign of the sun, where we're going to be going, where the moon, again, rules our emotions. It rules the inside. This is the moon going like, now I feel confident, though. While the sun is in Aquarius, like, we're not supposed to be living our best lives at necessarily at the moment, but this full moon in Leo is like on the inside, we're going to feel really confident though. We're going to feel like we're living our best lives. We may not be showing it on the outside, we may not even be doing it, but on the inside, I think this is really going to give us that like, okay, like this is what I have to look forward to. This is what, I have the confidence to go about. And again, haters will say that this Mars, squaring Mars is not going to be good, but here's the deal. The sun and Jupiter in this superior position with Mars, right? So I think I think the real problem with Mars and Taurus is just going to be like, while we're going to feel really good, we're going to be really excited, we're not going to be rushing. You know what I mean? It's like, oh boy, here we go. And then we slowly get up from our chair and we stretch and take our time getting there, right? And that's not a bad thing. Just because we're really excited and just because we kind of see it all right now and we're really feeling it, with Mars and Taurus, this is again what's like we could feel all of these things and see everything in this new way. But with this squaring Mars, it's like, what actions are you realistically going to take to get there? And again, it's Mars and Taurus. Like it's so much more about that momentum. It's so much more about that, like keeping it going, not stopping. You'll slowly get there, and yes, it is going to take some time. With Mars in the superior position to the moon, I think that's what's going to frustrate the moon in Leo, because your moon in Leo is going to be like, I want to do this, but with Mars squaring the moon, this is going to be like, it's going to take some time, and it's not going to go in every single way that you want it to go, and you're going to feel like you don't necessarily have the control over your situation that you want to right now. But what I like about this day, because this is a Jupiter day. I've been really learning this as Jupiter's been my time lord. Jupiter's so theoretical. Like it has nothing to do with like even doing things. Like Jupiter's just so much like, what are you thinking? Like how does that shape your reality? How does that shape your beliefs? So with this full moon and full moon on top of Jupiter, sure, if you want to do something with it, go for it. Even though Mercury is basically like motionless in the sky, but this is so much more of a day to just feel things, just like get excited. Like maybe plan for a vacation once it's all kind of safe. I know that's something I'm working on. Like that's like what my soul is holding on to, is planning for a vacation after all of this. But it's just so much more about, it's just so much more inspirational. It's so much more heady, not so much, physical reality, like tangible. But let's move on. Anyway, that was, what's it called? What day are we on? That was Friday. No, that was Thursday. So then we get to Friday. And what goes on Friday? Oh, by the way, I didn't even mention this too. On this full moon in Leo, Venus is also going to be conjoining Pluto, which again, this is where Venus is going to station retrograde next year. And Venus on Capricorn, this is what I want. This is what I'm going to do to get it. This is exactly how I like it. And with Venus on Pluto, there's some anxiety. That's just Pluto, right? But I think with Venus on Pluto with this full moon, it's like when when just shit just clicks, and like that moment where things click, where it really hits you and you go, okay, now I know what to do. Now I know what must be done. Now I know where to go. Now I know what to focus on. Now I get it. Now I see what's actually in front of me. Like, I really can't emphasize enough, Thursday's one of those days where it's like, it kind of just clicks. And again, you've probably felt really weird over these past few weeks. Like, it hasn't felt like January. It doesn't feel like 2020 anymore, but 2021, no, that feels weird. This is where it's all going to kind of start to really hit. Then we get to Friday. Only thing with Friday, that moon coming off that full moon is just going to be going opposite Mercury. Now, this is interesting because Mercury stations retrograde on Saturday, right after this. And so with the moon in Leo making that last aspect to Mercury before it stations, this is that moon in Leo being like, this is what I'm passionate about. This is what's coming from my heart. This is what I'm excited about. As it goes opposite Mercury in Aquarius, again, Mercury in Aquarius, Mercury being about our communication, the way that we communicate, the way that we say things, the way our mindset works. It's like we're trying to do things in that Capricorn way, right? Like have a structure, have a system, but let's be more open about it. Let's be more easygoing about it. Like what's going to work and what's not going to work. We don't have to be so rigid all the time. So with this moon in Leo being like, this is what I'm passionate about, this Mercury in Aquarius being like, well, I'm willing to do what works as long as it works. I think this moon in Leo opposite Mercury talk is very confidence boosting. I think it's very as Mercury's about to station retrograde, I think this is the moon kind of like questioning Mercury and be like, hey, like, if you're about to go retrograde and with all the stuff you're going to do, like, are you going to do it big? Are you going to do it grand? Are you going to do you really see what you're getting yourself into? And so I think that's really the thing to look out for on Friday is with the moon opposite Mercury. Just really think like, hey, what am I about to rethink? What am I about to redo? What am I about to go over in these past few weeks? And what needs to be done? What needs to be looked at? Because this moon's full at this point. This moon's still very bright. So anyway, we get to Friday, then we get to Saturday. Mercury stations retrograde. Moon enters Virgo, trines Mars. This is where, I don't want to say like the dominoes like fall. Like this doesn't look bad, but this is where it's like, if you've been feeling like, okay, like what's going on? What am I doing? What's the next thing? Mercury retrograde. Like expect things to happen. Expect messages to be received. Expect messages to be sent. Expect things to be switched up. Expect plans to be delayed. And again, I hope that we're at the point with astrology that we don't have to fear for Mercury retrogrades. Of course, like Mercury retrograde, you might, mess up, like you might break your phone or, some technological issue is going to happen. That's just the name of the game with the Mercury retrograde. And that inconvenience can definitely play a big, a story for you for the next couple weeks. But with Mercury, being so much more than just kind of like our technology or even, oh, thank you for blessing me, because I'm sure some of you did. I heard it, but as Mercury retrogrades, this is where it's like, okay, this is the system that I've been playing with. This is the ideas that I've been working with in the past few weeks. Let's go over that. What worked? What didn't work? As the moon's in Virgo, the moon now in Virgo being like, let's hyperanalyze, let's detail, let's plan, let's get things really specific. Trining Mars and Taurus, I think that incentivizes Mars and Taurus. Like Mars, like the moon in Virgo is like, oh, you need like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Like, and the Mars and Taurus is like, I'll take, whatever's going to make me feel good. And so as the moon's in Virgo trining Mars, I think there's this is very progressive when it comes to moving forward with things. Kind of getting the details right too, especially because again we're not in a rush, and if you're in a rush right now, like that's really a shame because you're not going to go anywhere fast. You should not be in a rush at this moment. You really should be taking your time. That is it does not take a genius to look at all of this and be like, oh yeah, like maybe the universe wants us to slow down a little bit and not go so fast. But as this moon in Virgo trines Mars, this is like, okay, getting the incentive, getting the clear direction to move forward. With Mercury going retrograde, this is like, okay, this is what you have to redo. This is what must be redone. This is what must be relooked at, right? So give it a couple weeks. Now that Mercury's retrograde, and I think this is going to be really the Mercury retrograde to not only set off these Mercury retrogrades in the air signs, but this is really going to bring this Mercury retrograde is really going to bring in the context with all of this Aquarius stuff. Like this is, along with the new moon in Aquarius that we're going to have later on in February, along with that new moon and this Mercury retrograde, like this is where we're really going to start getting that context. Things are going to really start to become clear. And now we're deep in it, and now we, can make decisions. Now we can change plans. Now we can do the things that we need to do, right? So then we get into Sunday. And Sunday, the moon will go opposite Neptune, make a trine to Venus. That's really good for any type of creative work. That's going to be really good for, yeah, creative work specifically. Getting your life together. If you do not have your life together, this is a great day to get your life together. And the sun's squaring Mars. So the sun square Mars. My favorite analogy I get to make, and I'm so glad I get to make this. This is really only a certain group of people will get this analogy because only so many people have seen this movie, apparently. I feel like more people should have seen it. But if you've ever seen The Incredibles, I like using this Incredibles analogy a lot. Sun square Mars. When we talk about the Mars-Sun synod, which means Mars's relationship to the sun and how, they make their aspects and go around each other. We have the Sun-Mars Cazimi, right? That technically happened in September of 2019. If you guys remember, Mercury was involved too, and it was in Virgo. The Sun-Mars Cazimi, right? That's when things kick off. That's the new Mars cycle. Then we have the Mars square. This usually happens a little while after, because technically, like, by the time it gets, like, all you gotta know is the first square happens, like, a few months afterwards. If we talk about Mars in the Sun synod, it's always usually analogized as, like, the hero's journey. And so if we look at it through the eyes of the hero's journey, Mars squaring the sun is like the hero's initial conflict, right? We get to the Mars opposition, which Mars doesn't go opposite the sun until it goes retrograde. So, this is a year later at this point from the Sun-Mars conjunction, we have the Mars-Sun opposition. And this is the climax, this is the fight, right? Like, this is the middle of the movie. And then we get the closing square. Now, my favorite analogy of this is The Incredibles, because The Incredibles, for one, it's a hero story, so of course it's going to be black and white and obvious, but that moment where they're all in the car, they're going home, they're all a big super family now, and they're all stoked about it, and then they get home, and Syndrome has Jack, right, and tries to kidnap him. It's like, that's the Sun-Mars square. We just finished this big conflict. We just had all of this crazy shit, like, this has been last year was a crazy year. That was all of the conflict. This Mars square sun, though, we have one last fire to put out. We have one last, battle to kind of face. And this doesn't look awful, but I think with Mars and Taurus squaring the sun in Aquarius, it's like, the sun in Aquarius has to adapt. The sun in Aquarius is like, I'm running low on energy. I can't just waste all of, my time. And with Mars and Taurus, with things going really slow, there's this, like, tension between, like, how do I get this bull to move faster? How do I get this show on the road, basically? And with Mars and with the sun in the superior position here with Mars and Taurus, this really looks like, with Mars and Taurus, be consistent. Of course, with the things that you're going to get with Mars and Taurus, and I've been trying not to hit on this too much because I feel like a lot of people take it personally, but like the Mars and Taurus thing, like, you're going to feel lazy. You are not going to want to do things. Mars has been fucking retrograde and squaring Saturn, like, it's not like we were all feeling energized and then are all dumped. Like, this was, you should have seen this coming. But as Mars is in detriment, Mars ain't going to be good at doing things. Fights and conflicts are a little bit nastier. Energy's low. Don't want to go too far. Don't want to go nowhere. But as the sun squares Mars, it's kind of like, well, what are you going to do to combat that slowness? What are you going to do to, get around that or make it work for you? And I think with the sun in Aquarius at this point, like, again, you should be taking your time. It is all about keeping it steady, but don't be afraid to do things differently. I think with the sun in Aquarius, I don't mean do things different. I mean do things differently for you. Kind of like how people say, "Oh, I just bought a new car, but it's a used car, but it's new to them." Like, do things differently for you. With the sun in Aquarius, don't be afraid to search for ideas that work for other people. Don't be afraid to do things the way that works for other people and that you see results with. I think with the sun squaring Mars, though, you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. And there is going to be a challenge, this sun square Mars, that could look like, feeling sluggish. That could feel like being stopped. That could feel like, I just watched The Lord of the Rings for the first time the other day. And the scene where Gandalf is trying to get into the cave, and he, like, doesn't have the right password, is like, that's sun square Mars, right? It's like, Okay, you got to the fucking goddamn mountain cave. Now we got to figure out the password. That's very Sun in Aquarius, square Mars and Taurus. So, don't be afraid to, do what works for other people. Don't be afraid to, go buy a system, go buy a new plan, go buy a new routine. But just whatever it is, you're gonna have to get out of your comfort zone in order to do it. There's no getting around that. Yeah, but also with I can't emphasize enough, with the moon opposite Neptune. This, again, great day to get your life together. This is going to be really, getting the illusion away. And as the moon's in Virgo, trining Venus, like in Capricorn, like organize your stuff. If your house is dirty, clean it. If you need to do laundry, this is it's Sunday, so it's laundry day for a lot of people. But that's really what this is looking like. We get to next week. Next week actually is all Venus. Incredibly, Venus enters Aquarius. Venus conjoins Saturn. Venus squares Uranus. And the Saturn-Uranus square begins. Now, technically, the Saturn-Uranus square really won't begin until, like, later next week. And then it actually won't happen until the week after that. But it really begins next week. It's going to be within a degree orb of each other. So, next week is when, the way I would like to put this is, we're having a party. The sun's in, Saturn's hosting this party. This is at Saturn's house, the Aquarius house. Sun is there. Jupiter's there. Saturn's there. Mercury is now retrograde there. So Mercury just did something that was kind of like cringy. And next week, as Venus goes into Aquarius, this is where the party starts. And Venus is like, okay, let's actually make this fun, because this is like a whack ass party. So next week looks great. I think next week though, of course, Venus is going to square Uranus. We're going to have the Saturn square Uranus. Like, get ready for the instability. But this is also kind of like there's now more motivation to do things differently. Now with all this Aquarius stuff, there's like, oh, now I kind of see how doing these new things are going to cause some issues, and there's, just going to be about adapting and just going to be about learning, really. So with that being said, thank you guys so much. I think that's what I got for you guys this week. And with that being said, I love and appreciate every single one of you guys, and I'll be seeing you next week.